The 2024-25 Premier League season finally gets underway today as Manchester United take on Fulham in the opening match. So, like I did last year, let's go ahead and predict where every Premier League team will finish, who will get relegated, and who our eventual champions could be. Lads, lasses, and the rest of the masses, welcome back to the channel. I'm Mono from Mono CFC, and welcome to another Premier League prediction. Now, last year I got some things right, I got some things utterly wrong, and this time I think it's time for some redemption. So I'm not going to waste too much time, let's get right into this. And let's start with the relegation zone. Now the first team I'm going to be putting in here in 20th position, and one of the teams to be relegated, they're going up and then they're going straight down, it's Southampton. Now, I think they are clearly the worst team in the league, and their transfer business doesn't really inspire me at all. I suppose Ben Brereton Diaz is decent, but I don't think that's enough to drag them out. They've also been linked to a move with Leslie Ugochukwu from Chelsea on a loan deal, but again, I don't think that's going to significantly improve them enough to keep them out of the relegation zone. I expect them to go straight down, and obviously, for me, they are just worse than Leicester and Ipswich, who are the other two promoted sides, and thus they have to go bottom. 19th place is up next, and I'm going to be putting in Leicester City. Chelsea have taken the two main good things about Leicester's team, that being Enzo Maresca and Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. Their transfer business isn't too impressive, with Bobby D. Cordova-Reid and Facundo Buonanotte from Brighton being the only notable signings they've made, obviously that last one being on a loan. They have been heavily linked with Adam Hlerzek, which would improve them, and they do still have a decent side with Fatawu, Mavididi, etc. But I don't think they'll do particularly well as their manager in Steve Cooper. It just isn't the most inspiring in my opinion. I think that their team, in comparison to the rest of the teams in the league, is just lower quality overall. And I don't think they'll be able to get out of the relegation zone for this year. Now we move into 18th place, and this is a team that I'm putting quite low, and I know that fans of this team are going to be really pissed off at me for doing this. I'm going to be putting Fulham in 18th. Now this is hard. The bottom teams surrounding 18th to 13th is really hard to predict in my opinion. Personally, I've gone with Fulham in the relegation zone because I think they're going to massively struggle unless Muniz continues to score a lot of goals, and that's no guarantee. They have lost their best player in Joao Paulinho and haven't yet replaced him as of the time of recording. And of course, as I said before, Bobby D. Cordova-Reid has gone, Willian has gone, who was pretty good for them, and of course Tosin has also gone, who we nabbed on a free, and his replacement in Jorge Cuenca just simply isn't the same calibre of player. Ryan Sessegnon has made a return on a free, but he ain't getting in the team over Robinson anyway, so that doesn't really improve their first team. The one positive is that they have brought in Emile Smith-Rowe from Arsenal, but I don't think that he's going to hit the ground running or anything. I don't think he's a player that's going to massively transform Fulham in any way, and Marco Silva isn't the greatest coach in the world. I genuinely think they're going to really struggle without Joao Paulinho in the centre, and like I kind of theorised with other teams last year, saying that them missing certain players would drag them down, I think that is going to really affect Fulham this year, and they're going to just struggle to get above the other teams. Before we go any further, in case you missed it, memberships are now available on the channel. For as low as 99p a month, you can become a member by clicking the join button below the video and unlock access to exclusive perks such as badges, emotes, and my members only Discord, where I'll be running my FPL mini league where you can compete to win prizes, as well as watch bonus videos that I can't put here on YouTube, and more. I really hope to create a thriving community in the server, and the money goes directly to supporting me and the channel, so if you're interested, become a member today and join the masses. Now let's get back to the video. Now, that means that in 17th place, and just surviving the drop, is one of the newly promoted teams. It's going to be Ipswich Town. Now, I absolutely love McKenna. I think that he's a very good coach. And I think that they are going to be the one promoted team to do well. There's usually one promoted team that does well. Obviously, last season was a bit of an exception to that rule. There's always one promoted team that does decently well. I reckon it will be Ipswich, as their football is a bit more expansive than the other two. They don't have the greatest squad, but I think that the team as a group and as a collective is bigger than the individuals in that regard. They've got some decent players as well, though. They've got Leif Davis, obviously, Axel Tuanzebe. They've got Amari Hutchinson, who they've just made a permanent signing now from Chelsea. They've just brought Ben Johnson in from West Ham on a free, which is a really decent upgrade from that side. And they also look to be signing Calvin Phillips, which, in my opinion, is a very smart bit of business for a lower level side. I know he obviously didn't really work out at City, but City have so many good midfielders, it's like he's never was really ever going to work out there anyway. We all kind of raised our eyebrows when that deal did go through. The big one for me, though, is that they've signed Muric from Burnley, the goalkeeper, who was arguably one of Burnley's only shining lights in an otherwise dire season. And again, that's one of the main positions you really want to strengthen in as you're being promoted, is in your defence and in your goalkeepers, and just trying to not concede, because the issue with the majority of promoted sides especially is the fact that they try and play very attacking football and they get counted on and they get punished for being so expansive, and having a good solid defence is obviously going to gonna aid them in that way. Obviously they play with the attacking fullbacks. Obviously Leif Davis, as we've mentioned, is really good attacking fullback, and having Ben Johnson on the other side definitely helps them do that if they want to do it on the right side too. I think they'll be good enough to survive the drop, and in general I think they're, because of the football that they play, they'll just be a bit better than some of the other bottom teams, and they'll kind of get the points on the other bottom teams. In 16th place, I'm putting Nottingham Forest. Now, they didn't do fantastic last season, and they've had to sell some decent players of theirs to comply with the financial issues that they've been going through. They've lost Niakate and Mangala, which is horrific for them. They've brought in the big Serbian Nikola Milenkovic and Elliot Anderson from Newcastle to replace them, but I don't think that's much of an improvement, if any. I don't really think that Nuno Espirito Santo is a good enough coach to drag them any higher than this, if I'm being honest. The front line is still good though, so I expect them to just survive if they don't get any more points deductions, that is. In 15th place, I'm going to be putting Wolverhampton Wanderers. The players that they've brought in, Jorgen Strand Larsen and Rodrigo Gomez, don't seem like world beaters to me. We'll never know. Obviously, they've brought in Pedro Lima as well, who's a decent bit of business, and it was someone that Chelsea was looking at in that right back spot. So maybe he'll get a starting place on the right and he'll be very good there. And they've obviously permanently bought Doyle now from Man City. Losing Max Kilman and Pedro Neto, though, is a really big hit, and thus I've dropped them a place from last season. However, I underestimated Wolves massively last season, and I won't do that again, so I'm not going to expect them to plummet anything like that. Before, I think I put them in the relegation zone last time. I'm not doing that. I think they'll still be okay. The rest of the team is very decent. But obviously those two players are massive for them, and them losing them and not really replacing them with like-for-like switches, I think that's going to harm them, obviously, and they're going to probably do a lot worse than they did last season. 14th place is going to be given to Everton. Now, I think they are solid enough to get away from the relegation zone. We know how good Sean Dyche is at making defensive sides. Losing Onana is really bad, but they actually started performing better when he wasn't there, funnily enough, which was really funny. Ben Godfrey is another big loss, but they seem to have swiftly replaced him with Jake O'Brien. And as I said, Sean Dyche is a negative coach, he's a defensive coach, and they'll be really hard to beat like they were last year, and thus I think they'll get a decent finish. I reckon they could get higher than this, but I am just worried that they're going to get another points deduction, so I've put them very relatively low. They definitely could get up to the kind of upper mid-table, but for now I've just left them in 14th place. In 13th place, and the last team in this section, I'm going to be going with Bournemouth. It took time for them to gel last season, but then they started to really fire, and I don't think they'll have that same issue now that they've had the one season under their belt. They probably would have finished higher last year without that terrible start, and I think that obviously if they don't have that and they kind of hit the ground running this year, they'll actually be able to sustain a decent place here. Obviously the big elephant in the room is the fact that they've lost Dominic Solanke, who was the main source of their goals and probably is going to be a massive hit. I put in my notes here, Solanke leaving is absolutely team destroying, but the thing is they have replaced him in, they've brought in Eris Unal and Evan Ilson. I don't know if they're good enough replacements. Obviously they're not Prem proven, so I don't think they'll particularly replace the goals that he's leaving behind. But it's a decent bit of business, and they've obviously brought in Luis Sinisterra as well, who's a pretty decent signing, but he doesn't improve them drastically. Losing Lloyd Kelly is pretty bad too. I think they will drop a place or two, but not enough for them to get relegated or anything. Andoni Iraola is a great coach, and I would be surprised if they plummet any further than this. Now, moving into this next section, and in 12th place, I'm going to be putting Brentford. This might be a bit high for Brentford, considering they finished 16th last season, but I think Thomas Frank is a fantastic coach, and with Ivan Toney back for the entire season, which they didn't have him for the majority of last season, I reckon they'll climb back up. Now, don't forget, Brentford were 9th the season before Toney got banned. They've also been pretty smart in the transfer window, with Fabio Carvalho coming in from Liverpool to help and try and provide for the big man up top, and Igor Thiago will be a decent addition to the back line. In terms of outgoings, they haven't really lost anyone important, so I think they'll have a decent season. In 11th place, I'm going to be putting Brighton and Hove Albion. They've lost Pascal Gross, which is a big loss. They don't have De Zerbi, which is a big loss, and the new manager is new to English football and quite new to coaching in general. It could be tough for him to kind of hit the ground running in this league. Time will obviously tell. They've brought in some promising young stars, as they often do, like Yankuba Minter from Newcastle. They've brought in Brian Guda from Mainz and Mats Wiefer from Feyenoord, but we don't know how good they'll be. And I think mid-table is good for them, and I don't expect them to move further up or down, so I've put them in the same place that they finished last season. 10th place is reserved for Crystal Palace. They've got a really good coach, and I reckon they'll continue the good form that they left off the last end of the season with. They have a really solid squad with Mateta, Eze, Anderson and Gave, etc. They don't have Elise anymore, obviously he's gone to Bayern, but Ismail Assar is a half-decent replacement, and Daichi Kamada, who they've brought in, is a sleeper signing too. He's a very talented player that will no doubt improve them. And there's been no significant outgoings for them as of right now either. I think they'll push for a high mid-table spot. In 9th place, and this might be a shock, I might be one of the only people on this site that's going to be predicting this team this low. I'm putting Manchester United into 9th. Now, they've made a lot of decent signings, but they haven't really improved the area that they actually needed to. De Ligt replaces Varane going out. Yoro is excellent, but he's been ruled out for months now with an injury. Mazraoui isn't much better than Wan-Bissaka, and Joshua Zirkzee, who they brought in, isn't a proven goal scorer. Like Højlund before him, he's just a kind of another average striker from the Serie A, and I genuinely don't believe that they've actually reinforced in the area that they needed to, which was their attack. Obviously, last year, they were so good defensively, but they just couldn't score, and they haven't really done anything to change that. Obviously, we know how good United's defence were, and the majority of the players that they brought in are more defenders, and I don't think that improves their team at all. Obviously, they've had this big overhaul in the actual club and how that works, but they haven't changed the manager, and the manager is terrible. Let's be real, Erik ten Hag is not a good manager, and well, at least isn't a good suit for the Manchester United team, and that's why they struggled so badly last year. Not only have they got that, but they've now got left back Luke Shaw has been injured immediately, and they're looking to replace him with either Ben Chilwell or Marcos Alonso, and as a Chelsea fan, both of those two are awful. And obviously, well, Alonso was decent for us, but he's not in the twilight of his career anymore. And as I said, I just don't think that Ten Hag is a good enough coach to actually take them forward, despite all the changes. Despite all the ex-Ajax players that they brought in, I just genuinely don't think they're going to do well. I think their season is really, really dependent on the likes of Garnacho and Rashford, if he plays, to kind of drag them forward. But if those two don't have good seasons, then I don't see them improving very much from last year. Now, in 8th place, and the last team to go into this row, I'm going to be putting West Ham United. They absolutely won the transfer window big time. They've not spent big, but they've definitely spent smart. Now, Wan-Bissaka, Todibo and Kilman are all massive improvements to the backline, in my opinion, and Nicholas Füllkrug, Luis Guilherme and Crescencio Somerville, who I personally wanted at Chelsea, are big going forward for them. The losses that they've had are basically insignificant, as they've all been replaced very swiftly and with players that are either better or equal to them. And I think they'll improve from last season, but I'm not entirely convinced by the manager. Obviously, they've gotten rid of David Moyes now, who was a big part of the success that West Ham had and were having for the last recent years. Obviously, he got them a European trophy, and I'm not entirely convinced by Lopetegui, but pretty much any time that I expect West Ham to do well, they don't do very well. They kind of disappoint me, and I'm sure West Ham fans probably feel the same way whenever they think they're going to have a good season and they end up not having a good season, and then when they don't expect to have a good season, they usually do better. But I am going to back them to do well this year, and I've put them into 8th, and I reckon with some luck with the other placements and where other teams finish in the cups and stuff, I think they will get Europa Conference League football next year. Now, in 7th place, and the first team that's going into this third row, I'm going to be putting Newcastle United. They don't have Europe this year, so that won't disrupt them. Obviously, the main reason why I feel like they didn't do as well last season was the sheer amount of games they were playing in the Champions League and all the injuries that they got because of that. They've obviously got Sandro Tonali back after his ban. They're getting him back in late August, and that is a massive boost for them. They've just brought in Lewis Hall, who I know as a Chelsea fan is an excellent signing on that left-hand side, who can also play as a left centre mid if they want to play him there. They brought in Lloyd Kelly from Bournemouth, who I mentioned before, who will massively improve that back line too. And they've sold well, with Elliot Anderson going to Forest, Minter going to Brighton, Dummett, Karius and Ritchie all leaving basically has no effect on them at all. And I think they'll massively improve from next season without the restraint of having extra games to play. Now, going ahead of them is going to be Aston Villa in my list. They've lost Douglas Luiz, which is a big loss, but obviously they've replaced him swiftly with Amadou Onana. His name's not Andre. And Ian Martson, also, that they brought in, is a fantastic signing. Again, as a Chelsea fan, I know how good Ian Martson is. Obviously, he dragged Dortmund to the final of the UCL, and he was very instrumental in the fact that they got there. He was very good for them. They've also added a few promising wingers after Diaby has left, and obviously Diaby, they sold for a very, very good price to the Saudi League, to Al Ittihad, but he never really felt like he fit into Aston Villa, and he never really hit the ground running, in my opinion. They brought in Cameron Archer, Jaden Philogene, etc. And Champions League football will take them down a few places, so that's why I've brought them down to 6th place. Obviously, they finished 4th last year. I don't think that because of the heavy schedule that they're going to do as well, and like Newcastle before them, I feel like that's going to really take a strain on the squad, and they aren't going to do as well as they did last year. However, obviously Emery is an absolute top coach, and I reckon they'll get in or around Europa again, despite the amount of tough games that they'll have to play. In 5th place, and this pains me to say, it's our beloved Chelsea. Now, this really hurts because I'm so hopeful for this team, and I love Enzo Maresca and the way that he plays football, and our squad is genuinely really, really good. But I'm kind of going with head over heart here. There's no way we get worse. There's no way we get a worse finish than before. Obviously, we've got a much better coach, in my opinion, personally, for the tactics and the specifically the player profiles that we have. He's a much better coach for the players that we have. And we've obviously brought in some key names. Pedro Neto is a massive improvement on the left wing. That's the one area we really needed to improve in, was the left wing, and we've done that. Tosin has come in as obviously a very big improvement if he starts, and Kieran Dewsbury-Hall has come in, and he's obviously going to be playing a lot of games, especially in the Europa Conference League. I think he'll play a lot of games. And he's, again, it's all just kind of improvements, and for me, he's a better player than Conor Gallagher in terms of being a technical footballer and being able to actually be a creative player, which is something we didn't really have in that area before. But the main thing is the injuries that we've had last season absolutely harmed us, definitely harmed us. We had the most injuries out of any team in the league. And Nkunku, Fofana and Lavia all coming back feel like brand new signings, and the two of them, obviously Nkunku and Lavia, have been very, very impressive in pre-season already. Fofana is touted to kind of be our first choice right centre back, and I think that his aggression will carry him forward. Obviously, if he can stay fit. These are the main caveats. If they can stay fit, obviously we know that we're not going to have James for the first few games, not only because he's gone a bit, he has a small hamstring strain, but because he's obviously banned from the season before when he got a red card. But yeah, I think they are all brand new signings. I think that we'll do very well, and maybe I'm being a bit pessimistic here. Genuinely, I think a lot of Chelsea fans and will kind of predict us to finish in the top 4, and I personally think that that's a goal of ours. I think that we should be finishing the top 4. I feel a bit pessimistic about the fact that the teams above us, the teams that I put above us, are just better than us, and I don't think that we'll finish above them, despite how hopeful I am for the team. I do think that, again, having the extra games in the Conference League, even though they aren't particularly tough games in the Conference League, I think we'll go very far into that competition, and I think that the extra strain will prevent us from getting top 4. But again, I might be being a bit pessimistic, though. Usually I don't really like to predict my team to do really, really well, because a lot of people will be like, oh, you're biased, but whatever. I do reckon we will win silverware this year, though. That's the prediction I'm going to say. I do not think we get out of this season without winning a trophy. Whether that be the Conference League, which I would personally expect us to win, or one of the English Cups, I think that Enzo Maresca is going to have a successful season, and next year we're going to push on even further than this. Now, the team that I'm going to be putting as the first team in the top 4 is Liverpool. Now, they basically have the exact same squad. They have not changed absolutely anything as of recording right now, and now they've got a worse manager. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp was fantastic for them, and basically the main reason that they've been doing so well the last few years is the fact that his football and his philosophy and how he instilled it in the team, not only the team but also the fans as well, the way he connected that entire club as a whole, I think is so important for them, and now they don't have that. They've obviously brought in Arne Slot, who is a decent manager in his own right, but again, he's really unproven. He's obviously been a good coach in the Eredivisie, but that's nothing in comparison to actually playing in the Premier League, which is a much tougher league. I just don't have much faith in him, and the way that he plays football is a lot different to the way that Liverpool used to play football, so maybe that doesn't suit the team as well. As I said, they've made basically no signings to actually improve them, but again, the outgoings aren't very impactful either. They've lost Matip, Thiago, etc. They weren't really playing anyway. However, there are massive rumours that Luis Diaz might be leaving, and if that is the case, then maybe they could go further down than this, because he'd be a big miss. As I said, basically the reason why I've dropped him one place is just because the teams around them have improved, and they have just not done anything. They basically are the exact same team, just with a different coach, who in my opinion is a lot worse than the coach that they already had. So 4th place will be good for them. They'll obviously get Champions League football again. That's very common for them. Obviously they've got a very good squad overall in general, so them not really changing their team, they didn't really need to change the team much, though it is a little bit aging. But yeah, I think they'll be perfectly comfortable getting top 4. I don't think that'll affect them too much. Now, the team I'm going to be putting in 3rd is actually Tottenham Hotspur. Now, this might be a bit weird because I'm a Chelsea fan to be predicting Spurs to do so well, but they have made smart signings. And remember what I said last season when I was saying that the Maddison-Harry Kane combo could be absolutely devastating, and then obviously Kane eventually left for Bayern, so that didn't work out. Well, they've just signed Dominic Solanke, and I think that combo of the Solanke and Maddison, if Maddison can stay fit, of course, is going to go nuts. Like, genuinely, I think that they are going to have a Dele Alli, Harry Kane-esque combination, and it's quite scary actually, because the one thing that kind of prevented Spurs from being a top threat last season was the lack of a striker. They didn't have a very good striker. They obviously were trying to play Richarlison there. He's not the greatest. They had to play Son there, and he's better on the wing, obviously. And I just don't think that they really had that firepower, because their defence was decent, and obviously they played that weird high-line style, but obviously they had the recovery pace to get back. Obviously they made signings with Destiny Udogie and Mickey van der Ven, and obviously Vicario in net, and they very definitely improved in the back line. So I don't think that the defence was ever really the issue. It was more so the fact that the strikers just wasn't there. So now they've got that, and obviously Solanke is going to be a player that definitely improves them massively. It's a big fee for him, I will say. It's a big fee, and a bit weird seeing Solanke go there considering he's ex-Chelsea, but obviously he's a fantastic signing for them. They've also brought in other players though as well, and so obviously they've brought in Archie Gray, who is fantastic, and he's very versatile. He can play as a fullback or as a centre mid. I don't know. Obviously, I don't follow Spurs too closely. I don't know if they're actually playing him as a centre mid or a fullback. I'd imagine they're playing him as a fullback, because I don't think that their fullbacks are particularly great. Also, they've brought in Lucas Bergvall, who's going to play in the centre mid, so maybe that's the player that they play there. If you're a fan of Spurs, let me know in the comments. I don't know. But Lucas Bergvall, he's a decent player too, very, very decent. And I can't see them doing much worse than last season, to be honest. And again, they were really unlucky with injuries last season too. They were another one. Obviously, they had Mickey van der Ven pulled his hamstring in a game versus Chelsea last year. So, and he's obviously a big player for them. I don't think unless they have the same kind of luck with injuries and stuff, I think they'll still do very, very well, and they'll push for a Champions League spot. Now we move into the final two teams, and obviously when I reveal the second team, it's going to reveal who the champions are, so I'm going to do this very, very quickly. Manchester City are not winning the league this year, and I'm going to be unfortunately predicting Arsenal to win the league this year. And this really annoys me. This really, really annoys me to have to say. Let's start with Man City. Obviously, they've got a fantastic team. They've got a fantastic coach. I just don't expect them to win a 5th Premier League in a row. Statistically, it is not very likely for them to do. Admittedly, it wasn't very statistically likely for them to do 4 in a row, and they broke a record doing that, but I don't think I think that is kind of a bit ridiculous if they do get 5 in a row now. Obviously, they've lost Alvarez, they've recalled McAtee, who doesn't really improve them, if I'm being honest. Oscar Bob is a decent player, but unfortunately, literally as I'm recording this, it's been announced that he's fractured a bone and will be out for a few months, unfortunately. Sabio has been brought in, or Savinho as they're now calling him because they want him to sound a bit more Brazilian. But yeah, they've got a slightly aging team too, but they're still brilliant nonetheless. I think they're going to have a great season. Let's talk about Arsenal, and the reason why I think they're going to become champions is the fact that they have the exact same squad pretty much, but they've improved in the one area that they really needed to, and that was left back. Never really had much faith in Zinchenko to be good enough for Arsenal, and they've brought in Calafiori, who I will admit, as a Chelsea fan, I really, really wanted in my team. Calafiori is a fantastic left back / left centre back, and I think he's perfectly suited for that role. And obviously, Arsenal basically play 4 centre backs. That's why their defence is so good. With Ben White on the right hand side and now Calafiori on the left hand side, and they haven't lost anyone too important. They've obviously lost Smith Rowe, but again, not really important to this side, I don't think. And I just cannot see Arsenal, even though they are such a banter club and we love to take the mickey out of them. I just cannot see them competing for a 3rd year in a row and not winning it. I really can't. I don't think they're going to bottle it for a 3rd year in a row. There's no way that they do it. And obviously there's still question marks over their striker, because obviously they've been playing Havertz there, and he's not the greatest, but he has been finding form despite how mediocre as a player in general I feel like he actually is. They're making it work is what I would say. I don't think he's particularly the striker they needed, and I think that if they spent big and they went out and got a striker like a Solanke, like a Victor Osimhen, someone like that, I think they'd be shoo-in to win the league. But I just basically don't think that we're going to get the same top 2 that we got for the last few seasons now, with Arsenal coming second and Manchester City coming first. I just don't think it's going to happen. And as I said, eventually the consistency of Manchester City I think is going to fall off, and I think this is the season where it happens. I think that with all the other teams around them improving, there's a lot of really good teams, like all the way down to, I would say, down to 10th place. All the teams are pretty competitive, and I think that Manchester City will get beaten by a few of those teams, which they probably wouldn't have been beaten in previous seasons. But yeah, I'm gonna, as I said, I unfortunately will have to crown my Premier League champions as Arsenal, and to be honest, I think that any of the top 4 teams that I've put here can win the league this year. Genuinely believe that all of them have the ability to do so. I'm personally going with Arsenal just because I think that their squad is so good and so versatile, and also the fact that they basically just have like 2 good players for every position other than left back. But yeah, I think that they won't be denied a 3rd time. I think that Arsenal will win the league. Let's quickly do a quick recap just in case. In 20th place we have Southampton, Leicester City and Fulham in the bottom 3 places that will be relegated. The UEFA Conference League spots will be taken by West Ham and Newcastle. The Europa League spots will be taken by Chelsea and Aston Villa. The Champions League spots will be taken by Liverpool, Spurs and Manchester City. And then finally, again, your champions this year, unfortunately for us to say, will be Arsenal. Now those are just my Premier League predictions for this season. Let me know what you think we're going to have this season, what your predictions are. Let me know your wild predictions of the season, what's going to happen. And then at the end of the season, we'll obviously go back and we'll look at this, see how right I was, how horrifically wrong I was, and we'll test and compare from there. But if you can't wait until then, YouTube reckons you'll enjoy one of these 2 videos on screen in the meantime. Thank you guys so much for watching as ever, and remember, in the rain or in the dry, keep that blue flag flying high. Come on, you Blues.